It's 8 p.m. in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, 7 o'clock in Iqaluit, and 6 p.m. in Saskatoon. This is Canada Tonight. College chaos. Post-secondary institutions in Ontario push back on the Fed's student visa cap. Taking the stand. Donald Trump testifies in his New York defamation trial, claiming the allegations are totally false. Meeting at the intersection tonight, Sheila North, Charles Adler, and Robin Gill to discuss the international student visa cap and whether or not parents should pop the bubble wrap and let kids be kids. And on tonight's Spotlight, Mission to the Moon. Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen talks about the Artemis II mission.
From the Canadian Broadcasting Centre, this is Canada Tonight with Travis Dhanraj.
And good evening on this Thursday night. Also ahead this evening, the man accused of the Edmonton City Hall shooting has made his first court appearance. We'll have more on that. We'll tell you about the charges he's facing and what police are saying tonight. Plus, British negotiators walk away from trade talks with Canada. The sticking point? How much access the UK should have to the Canadian cheese market. And a Canadiens legend returns to Montreal. A live report from Patrick Waug's return to the city, which the legend was born. But first, let's start with Ottawa's cap on international students coming to Canada and the repercussions that it is now having. Ontario's colleges are sounding the alarm, insisting the slashing the number of the new student permits issued effectively slashes their budget. And a warning that some institutions may not survive. Sarah Galashan is on this on our breaking news desk right now. She joins me live from Vancouver. So Sarah, help us understand here. You know, this move from Ottawa was billed as something that was going to help with housing, but obviously these colleges are saying it is going to really hurt them.
They're saying that it's going to hurt. I mean, high level here, the concern was that too many international students were being enrolled and that there wasn't enough housing to house them. The concern, or at least one of the concerns from post-secondary institutions, is that the international students that are coming, they pay sometimes between 3 to 4 times what domestic tuition would be. And post-secondary institutions have come to rely on that money, some more than others. Now, to that, the Colleges Ontario, the organization, has issued a strongly worded statement today, and it starts off accusing the federal government of creating a moratorium by stealth with this new cap on study permits. That is, they say, already causing significant and unnecessary upheaval for students, employers, and communities. Let's talk about that upheaval. Last year's number of study permits that were issued by Canada, these are visas we're talking about, was 364,000. The plan is to cut that by 35%, and that process is already underway, and it's already having an effect. And not to get too in the weeds here, but in Ontario, what we understand is that as part of the visa application process, that the students, and some of them hoping to enroll as soon as May, they need to have a letter, a sort of stamp of approval coming from the Ontario government, and that system is simply just not in place at this point. The organization, the Ontario Colleges, is warning that the students, the schools that rely on their tuitions, and Canada's labour market could be adversely affected, and they are asking for this to be revisited, and they're asking in, as I say, pretty strong language, Travis. Yeah, we're going to talk to the president and CEO of Georgian College coming up to get reaction on all of this here in Ontario, but this isn't just an Ontario situation, Sarah. It's also similar in other provinces. Yeah, sure. I mean, there are international students going to post-secondary institutions right across the country. The thing about Ontario is that 51% of Canada's international students actually are in that province. And recent growth in enrollment is, very much happening in the college system. But it is also universities that are concerned about this, and our friends over at Power and Politics just interviewing the Association of Ontario Universities, who point out that this system of capping could also affect, unfairly they say, their ability to recruit undergraduate students, and they think it is unfair because some of them have housing programs in place. I think that should be considered. And I want to play you a little bit what they said on PNP.
Measure the performance of each organization. Are they providing the supports? Do they have housing? Are they holding their agents accountable? We believe the federal government is committed to that. They've indicated they want to resume that. And we think it's an opportunity for the province to follow up on where the federal government left off.
And Travis, let me just finish off here by speaking directly to any students, college students specifically, who might be watching from Ontario as well. In that letter that was issued, the Ontario Colleges is asking the Ontario government to approve for domestic tuition a hike of $135 per tuition. Now, it's not a huge amount of money, but it is sort of an indication that, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. Travis?
Indeed it is. Okay, Sarah Galashan in our Vancouver newsroom at the Breaking News Desk. Thank you, Sarah.
You bet.
All right, let's dig into this now. My next guest is part of the Ontario Colleges. Kevin Weaver is the president and CEO of Georgian College and joins me now from Barrie, Ontario. Mr. Weaver, thanks for joining us here on Canada Tonight. I know that you are very concerned about this move. How might this decision specifically affect your college?
Yeah, I am very concerned, as you said. It's could have significant impact, not only to the college, but the community at large, with a potential reduction of hundreds, potentially more, international students in our communities.
So there was no consultation, you're saying, that happened between colleges and the government?
We did not have any direct consultation on this. No, the announcement was a major surprise in terms of the scale and the impact of the announcement on Monday morning.
So I understand that half of your full-time students are international students. Why are they so important for Canadian colleges like yours?
Well, they're critical for a number of reasons. I mean, a college like ours, we are in central Ontario. We serve a region that is both urban and rural. And due to our demographics, we've seen tremendous decline in our domestic enrollment over that period of time. And so for us, it was, an opportunity to recruit international students to make sure that we still had the same level of programming, the same number of students, and in some cases growing, where we knew there were labor market needs. So, quite frankly, in our communities, it was an imperative to ensure we're supporting the labor force and economic development in our region.
The government says that there have been bad actors in this industry. What do you say to that argument?
I can't comment specifically on whether there are or are not, but what I would say is colleges like Georgian that have a high quality standard, that care about the student experience, we should not be penalized. And if there are bad actors, then I fully support finding a way to make sure those bad actors are no longer in the taking advantage of international students if they are. But let's not hurt everybody who is delivering quality education, focused on labor market, focused on really helping to drive this province and this country forward with the jobs we know are critical.
So what are the ramifications going to be across the country, you think, for institutions like yours?
Well, certainly for us, and as we've heard through the announcement, it's Ontario will be the hardest hit in terms of the reduction of caps, reduction of international student study permits. And so for us, a significant impact in both student numbers and therefore potentially graduates. Those students also spend money in our communities. They work part-time jobs while they study, often in the service and retail industry. And there is no doubt a financial impact to the colleges like ours who are trying to operate a variety of programs to support a number of sectors. And one of the things I'll add is international students quite often in programs allow us to offer more programs where we might only have 6 or 7 domestic students in some of our smaller communities interested in a certain program. If we can attract 5 or 6 or 10 international students, it allows us to keep that program going and support the labor market needs.
Do you see a situation where the government reverses this decision? And finally, real quick, what do you think a better strategy would have been?
Will they reverse it? Well, I certainly hope they will take a look at it. First of all, we need to slow down the moratorium or pause the moratorium on study permit approvals that is happening right now. Our college, like many, have intakes in the month of May. And our impact right now, we have hundreds of students who have been accepted, They want to come to Georgian College and study. No study permits are being approved right now. So I certainly hope there's quick action on that, and they will consider how to consult with both the province and the sector at large so that we can do this in a methodical way.
Okay.
A better solution would have been a little bit more of a surgical precision approach. If there's bad actors, let's support a system that gets rid of those bad actors, but let's not penalize those institutions that are critical to the economy.
Okay, Kevin Weaver, thank you so much. That is Kevin Weaver, President and CEO of Georgian College. He joined me from Barrie, Ontario.
Thank you.
And we'll have more reaction from Ontario colleges to the cap on international students. Coming up on our intersection panel tonight to discuss this, former Manitoba Grand Chief Sheila North, former journalist and communications consultant Ron Gill, and writer and podcaster Charles Adler. That conversation coming up on this issue and a lot more at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Well, the man accused of firing shots inside of Edmonton City Hall made an appearance in court today. He is also suspected of causing a small fire with a Molotov cocktail inside the building. Paige Parsons has been following this story for us. She joins us live from Edmonton. So, Paige, tell us what happened today in court.
Travis, it was a fairly quick appearance today for Bazani Savar. He appeared by video conference from the Edmonton Remand Center, where he's being held in a maximum security unit on 6 criminal charges. Several of those are weapons charges. One is arson, and there's also a charge related to explosives. He's being held on allegations that he fired several shots inside Edmonton City Hall, and also that he lit several explosives that Edmonton police believe were Molotov cocktails. So during this brief appearance, we didn't hear from him. It was mainly his defense lawyer, the Crown prosecutor, making arrangements for a future bail hearing, which is going to happen down the road, and then it was pretty quickly wrapped up. We did get a chance to speak briefly with his lawyer outside, who said, he's just been retained yesterday. He's only spoken with his client for a few minutes, and so he said he couldn't speak to the allegations, to his client's state of mind, but he did say that eventually they are hoping to seek bail.
Okay, and so what else have we learned about the suspect?
So we've now been able to confirm, we've heard from his company where he works, that he is himself a private security guard, and he's been doing that work here in Edmonton for a company since 2019. And today, a CBC News crew actually went up to North Edmonton to his apartment building to see what was going on. Police were there, and they've confirmed that they were executing a search warrant at the residence. We did speak with several of his neighbors, and they said, that they were surprised to hear that he is the suspect in this incident. They said that, as far as they knew, he was quiet, seemed nice. It was a surprising thing to happen, they say. And we also have seen a video circulating online on social media, and we've been able to confirm with people who know him that the accused is the person in this video, and in it he kind of addresses, a wide range of social issues. He talks about a mission, and we haven't been able to confirm where or when it was filmed, but we do know now that it is the accused who appears in that video.
Okay, Paige Parsons in Edmonton this evening for us here on Canada Tonight. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
In neighboring Saskatchewan, a forensics pathologist began testifying today at a coroner's inquest into Canada's worst mass stabbing in recent history. 11 people were killed in 2022 on the James Smith Cree Nation and a neighboring town. Sam Sampson joins me now from outside the center where the inquest is taking place. So Sam, thanks for being with us here. Take us through what was presented today.
Yeah, we heard 6 autopsy reports out of 11 that we will hear over the course of the inquest. And the 6 people that we heard more details about how they died, their names are Bonnie Burns, Gregory Burns, Lydia Gloria Burns, Christian Head, Lana Head, and Damian Sanderson. Now, as you can imagine, this is really graphic information that we're hearing. They are autopsy reports, but it's also really emotionally difficult details for family members to hear. But the families that I've spoken with over the past year and a half, as well as here today, the ones who are here want to hear those details. They want to hear how many times their loved one was stabbed. This is hard to hear. How many or where on the body they were stabbed, how long it took for them to die, and we got a lot of those details today. So The pathologist who testified this morning said that the victims that we heard about today suffered several stab wounds, but for most of them, there was one fatal blow either in the neck region or a blow that may have punctured their heart or their lungs. That's the case for most of them except for Damien Sanderson. Damien Sanderson was Miles Sanderson's brother. Miles was the attacker in all of this. And so RCMP told us earlier in the inquest that Miles stabbed Damien while they were in a car together. Damien was in the passenger seat and he fled out of the car into an area that was kind of covered by bushes. You couldn't see it from the road there, and that's where he died. RCMP found his body a day after the stabbings. So Damien's case is different because while most of the victims we heard about today, the pathologist said died within 2 and 10 minutes, it was the culmination of Damien's wounds that killed him, which could have taken a few minutes up to possibly more than an hour. Miles Sanderson's death, by the way, he died shortly after going into police custody after he was arrested a few days after the stabbings. That in-custody death triggers a mandatory inquest that'll happen later in February.
Okay, and Sam, I understand that you heard from healthcare professionals within the correction system. What did they have to say?
Yeah, we heard from a psychologist and a psychiatrist who both worked with Sanderson while he was spending time in federal prison. And the psychiatrist particularly painted a picture of a very burdened mental health system within corrections. And he was one of the few witnesses over this entire inquest who's given recommendations on how things could be better. So he said things like keep consistency among healthcare staff who work with inmates, better communication among different providers. But then he also focused on trauma and making sure that inmates address their trauma, whether that be through psychology, psychiatry, or even cultural work. And there seemed to be a focus, both with the psychiatrist and the psychologist, about keeping it a holistic treatment, encouraging inmates to go to counseling, even because it is a self-directed kind of care. And when they go for care, make sure that they get care. There was also a really touching moment at the end of it where the psychologist who worked with Sanderson apologized to the families for their loss and their suffering and said, I wish I could have seen something that would have shown that this would happen, but I just couldn't.
All right, our Sam Sampson in Saskatchewan this evening for us. Thanks, Sam. Well, a new report is detailing what's needed to search a Manitoba landfill for the remains of 2 First Nations women. Alana Cole has reaction.
No more delays. That was the message from Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kathy Merrick at a news conference this afternoon. There, with family members of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron, Merrick said they've completed a new report, a further study into what is needed to search the Prairie Green landfill for the remains of the 2 women. And now they want funding to get started, and they want the province to move quickly on the permits they need.
There's no room for compromise here. We insist on a meeting involving all 3 levels of government, and we won't accept anything less.
More than a year ago, police announced Jeremy Skibicki had been charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Myron Harris and an unknown woman given the name Buffalo Woman. He'd already been charged for Rebecca Contois' death. Some of her remains were found at the Brady Road landfill. Police have said they believe Myron and Harris's bodies are in the Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg. Today, Donna Bartlett, the grandmother of Myron, says she just wants to bring her home.
Her children are hurting to this day because they know their mom's not at the gravesite we have for her. That is my main purpose. Please get the landfill searched.
This is the second study detailing what will go into a search. Last year, a feasibility study looked at how a search could be done safely. Today, ISM Mascua, the organization hired as technical experts, says it could take 6 months to hire staff, buy equipment, and build a facility. And there's no way to know exactly how long a search would take.
And the search could be completed quite quickly, or it could take out to 1 or 3 years.
The initial feasibility study estimates the cost between $84 million and $184 million. Morgan Harris's cousin Melissa Robinson says that shouldn't be a factor.
If it was your loved one, would you want a dollar amount on it? No, you'd want them, right? You'd want their remains, you'd want to be able to bury them and lay them to rest properly.
Today, Robinson also made a point to call on Mayor Scott Gillingham to help with the efforts. She wants the city to donate land for the facility needed to conduct a search. AMC says they aren't sharing this new report publicly. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, later in the program, Donald Trump testifies in New York at his defamation trial. And next hour, Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Melissa Lantsman, will join us live in studio at 8 o'clock Eastern to talk about the House resuming next week and a lot more. And after the break, our spotlight conversation with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. You're watching Canada Tonight. Stick around.
Hello, I'm Colonel Jeremy Hansen. Stick around for my conversation with Travis coming up on Canada Tonight.
could lead to program closures, campus closures. It will certainly mean a number of layoffs. And I think there's a real concern for what this means in the mid and long term.
So revisiting our top story at this hour and the backlash to Ottawa's cap on international student permits. The organization representing Ontario's 24 public colleges says the cap essentially slashes their budgets. To compensate, Colleges Ontario is asking the province to approve a $135 increase per student annual tuition and raising provincial grants by 10%. Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen is in the spotlight here in Canada tonight. Hansen is poised to become the first Canadian ever to venture to the moon. He's part of NASA's Artemis II mission, which was slated for November but has now been delayed until 2025. Here's part of our conversation. And joining me now, Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. Good to chat with you again. So listen, I heard that this adventure into space all started way back when you were a kid and you saw a photo. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about this, and it's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to share the inspiration of things like space exploration with our youth. But my mom tells me I was 5. I couldn't have told you the age, but I do have the very distinct recollection of looking through Encyclopedia A. I was interested in airplanes. I would go in that encyclopedia a lot. And one day I flipped across Neil Armstrong, first human on the moon, and I saw this picture of a human being standing on the moon, and it just blew up my perspective of things. And I went back to that page so many times in my childhood, it's like burned in my brain. And it just made me think, wow, I'd love to be a space explorer. I turned my tree house into a spaceship. Yeah. I started exploring space in my imagination, and I never looked back.
What did that picture symbolize to you as a kid?
Well, I think, it's hard for me to know for sure, but what I think it did is it opened my mind to what was possible. Like the fact that humans left Earth, traveled to the moon, left blueprints, and came back. That was mind-blowing for me. It was clear. And then, that I could make that leap to be like, oh, okay, well, a rocket is sort of like my treehouse, and, my treehouse could launch and fly into space and go to the moon. That's what that did for me.
And here you are today. I know that you also have said that growing up on a farm, which you did, really helped you as an astronaut. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Such incredible respect for farmers, because they're just people that get in there and get the job done. They deal with a lot of challenge on a regular basis, and they just never quit. And so growing up at a farm, I just watched my father and other people working on the farm just dig into problems and solve them. Something breaks, you find a solution. If you have the right part, great. If you don't, then you makeshift something to make it work. Whatever it is, the crops still have to come off the field, or the animals still need to get fed. Just because you don't have the perfect part doesn't mean those things stop. It's got to go forward. And I learned that kind of resilience and hard work, the value of hard work. I had to work hard as a kid on the farm if I wanted to be employed and keep up with my dad, and that has paid off.
You also had to work hard when you were a fighter pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force. What did you learn when you were there doing that job, lessons that you take now?
There's many. In fact, I'm wearing my 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force patch here tonight, because this year we're celebrating 100 years since the Royal Canadian Air Force was formed. It'll be on April 1st. And, one of the things that I learned was just to respect what all the people who have come before me have done, the sacrifices that were made, and to walk in their footsteps is a big calling to be part of the Canadian Armed Forces. Specifically as a F-18 pilot, one of the things that I learned that I'll take with me on this journey is how to overcome emergency situations, how to deal with them, how to sort of set my fear aside. The fear is there. I mean, I'm human. I get scared of things, but I have to set the fear aside and work the problem, implement my training. And I had numerous situations when I was flying CF-18s where I had to execute that. And it gave me that confidence that it's okay, I can work through these things. I sort of can set that fear aside, compartmentalize it, and work the problem. And now I know as a crew, if we're up there and we're on our way to the moon and we have a problem, we will either solve the problem or we will die trying. But we won't be curled up in a ball in the corner complaining about it. We'll be actively working the problem.
It's so interesting to hear you say that you still have that fear factor there, but you just know how to deal with it now. Let's talk about Artemis II. And I know that the mission is very complex, but bring it down to earth if you can, and, tell us as simply as you can the mission for Artemis II.
Yeah, Artemis 2 is the first time we fly this capsule with humans on it, and it's a precursor for Artemis 3 and 4 and 5, where we'll take humans back and land on the moon. In those missions, in the future, we will have a lunar lander, but it's not ready yet. And so for Artemis 2, we just take this capsule, and the 4 of us, and we launch off Earth. We'll fly around the Earth once in about 90 minutes, and that'll give us a chance to look at the capsule, do a few quick tests, make sure we're happy with it. If we are, we'll do a burn. So we'll raise our altitude. We'll go out to 60,000 kilometers around the planet and come back. That'll take about a day. And during that day, we're going to do a whole bunch more tests. We're going to do some manual flying of the capsule, proving that it can rendezvous and dock with another spacecraft, which will be needed in the future, and make sure all the life support systems are ready for the remaining 8 days to get to the moon and back. And then we'll come back. It's going to be incredible. I mean, that view is going to be something, because when we go out to 60,000 kilometers, we will see the whole marble of Earth hanging in space. And then we'll come racing back in, over the next 12 hours, and it'll be as if we're coming home. But just before we hit the atmosphere, we'll burn the engine again, if everything is good, and then we'll zip out to the moon, 4 days to the moon, fly around it, see an Earthrise, and then fly back and splash down in the Pacific Ocean. And the whole idea, for anyone who followed the Apollo program, they did Apollo 7, where they tested their capsule in Earth orbit. And then they did Apollo 8, that historic mission where they flew to the moon and they went into lunar orbit, flew around the moon a bunch of times. Well, we're trying in a safe way to combine both of those missions into one. And that's why we have this very unique mission profile. But it's going to be something.
Nobody has ever trained for a mission like this. Obviously, the life support system, all of this stuff is very crucial, very sensitive. Does it ever do you ever get nervous?
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it other than I'm not nervous today. I can't be nervous for, 2 years waiting for a mission. That wouldn't be any way to live. So I don't feel nervous on any given day, but I look at things, we talk about this all the time. Yeah. I look at systems and I'm like, okay, that one fails. Okay, we have a backup. That one fails. Yeah, that's loss of crew. And, we are constantly looking at those things. For anything that we think is loss of crew for a failure, we always want to have at least one backup system, ideally. There are a few places where what we would call zero fault tolerant, where, if it fails, then you may lose the crew, but they're pretty rare. Heat shield's one of those. The heat shield either works or it doesn't work. There's not really any in between. On the heat shield, for example. But for most systems, we have a backup system, which gives us a lot of comfort. And then you work with this team. I mean, they're pretty extraordinary, and it gives you a lot of confidence that, there are things that could get you, but all in all, we think we have a really good chance of launching, going out to the moon, and landing safely and being breathing 9 days later in the Pacific Ocean.
Well, conversation continues next hour with Jeremy Hansen, and we've got a lot more as part of it. Also next hour, Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party, Melissa Lantsman, will be here to talk about the House resuming on Monday. She'll join us live in studio in about 30 minutes. Coming up next, trade talks with the British government are turning out not to be a breeze. We'll hear why negotiations with the UK have collapsed over Canadian cheese. And Trump testifies in his own defense. But last just a few minutes, we'll tell you what the former president had to say from his civil defamation trial in New York. That is coming up next here on Canada Tonight. Liberals' winter caucus retreat kicked off today in Ottawa with an address from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
The things that matter deeply in the daily lives of Canadians, Pierre Poilievre and his team voted against the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Dental Care Benefit. They voted against $10 a day childcare and voted against programs for seniors. We fought against inequality, raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class, and over the past years have helped lift over 650,000 kids out of poverty.
Evan Dyer joins me now from Ottawa with his new Canada Night debut with more on this. Good to see you, Evan. Hopefully you'll be on the show a lot. Take us through some of the challenges that the Liberals are facing right now.
Well, the number one challenge, of course, is their standing in the polls, which is getting pretty close to wipeout territory, according to the latest polls. And of course, as the Prime Minister meets with his caucus, he's making a speech here that's aimed at not only the electorate, but also at MPs who have to be worried about the Liberal Party standing in the polls. And the Prime Minister wants to show them, as well as show the electorate, that, that he's not going to be a drag on their own candidacies, that he's going to rather lift them up and help them to get re-elected. And so that message that we saw today was directed to the Canadian public, but also very much to that caucus. We have seen some rifts in that caucus in recent days, and one of them sort of got patched up today, and that was some comments made by Newfoundland MP Ken McDonald, a Liberal who represents a rural riding on the Avalon Peninsula outside of St. John's. And he said a couple of days ago that he would like to see a leadership review. He was asked, would you like to see a leadership review? And he said yes, and he made some other comments about the popularity of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in his own riding, the declining popularity in his riding. Let's watch a little bit of that interview in the run-up to this caucus retreat.
Normally, in most circumstances in politics, and especially in the federal government, if you go from a majority government to a minority government, there's supposed to be a leadership review. That hasn't happened.
So you think at least there should be a leadership review in the Liberals?
Yes, let's clear the air. Let's, as a party, let's clear the air, and if people are still intent on having the leader we have now, fine. But at least give people the opportunity to have their say of what they think the direction the party is going.
So there you go, Travis. I think pretty clear. He was asked, so you're calling for a leadership review, and said yes. But today, Ken McDonald walked that comment back. And he put out a tweet where he said, the intent of my recent public comments was not to personally call for a leadership review, and I'm not calling for one now. And he went on to say that, as he said, that he believes the Prime Minister is a smart politician and a great campaigner. And he did say those things, to be fair. He did say those things as well in the interview, but he went quite a bit further than that in talking about the declining popularity of the Prime Minister in his own riding. So today we saw Liberal MPs pushing back on that at the caucus retreat. Let's listen to some of what they said about where they stand on the Prime Minister's leadership.
He's been very clear that he wants to be the one who leads us into the next election, and he has my full support.
Could there be an asset?
Oh, in my view, absolutely. Look, this is the guy who's helped get more done for my community than in any other government in my lifetime.
What do you think? Should there be a leadership review?
Absolutely not. Very happy with the current leader.
I think Ken McDonald realizes that working together as a team is what Canadians expect of us, and leadership means supporting Canadians and having vision for the future.
So we saw a bit of a sort of a rally around the leader effort today there, and it does not appear that Ken McDonald's comments are the beginning of a big insurgency within the caucus yet, at least.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall inside that room. Okay, Evan, let's talk about tomorrow. We're expecting a court decision on a topic that's divided caucus, and that's not the only contentious subject ahead.
Right, and a huge court decision. It's not the final decision at the International Court of Justice on South Africa's allegations that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. This is just an interim ruling because South Africa also asked for immediate measures aimed at stopping a potential genocide happening in Gaza. And actually the Genocide Convention is very much about that. It's about preventing, more than punishing past genocides, it's about preventing one from happening in the future. So, of course, for the Liberal Party, that issue is a much more divisive one than it would be, for example, in the Conservative Party, because you have much more diversity of views about the Middle East in the Liberal Party than in the Conservative Party. But today we also saw Justin Trudeau pointing at another international conflict that perhaps might at one point be more of an issue for the Conservative Party, and on which there's great unanimity among Liberals, and that is the Ukraine war. Let's just watch what he had to say about that.
My very first call this year was with Volodymyr Zelensky. The Canadian government and most of the parties in the House will continue to stand with him. But Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives chose to vote against support for Ukraine, calling it a faraway foreign land to appease Putin apologists like Tucker Carlson and those who enable him.
So I think we're going to see that kind of messaging going forward from the Liberals, because already they've begun running some ads actually in the prairies, which is a major area for the Ukrainian diaspora, pointing at this, questioning Conservative support for Ukraine. And we've seen some reaction from the Ukrainian community. The League of Ukrainian Canadians, for example, writing to Pierre Poilievre just before Christmas to question what was going on in the Conservative Party, which has traditionally been a very strong supporter of Ukraine under Stephen Harper and under other leaders, but which now has had a few votes that have sort of called that support into question. So I think that that's going to be one point on which we can expect to see the Liberals go after the Conservatives.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting day in the House when it resumes next week. Evan Dyer in our Ottawa Bureau tonight. Thank you, Evan.
Thanks for having me, Travis. Bye.
Well, trade talks between Canada and the UK have stalled after the British government announced it was walking away from the table. After almost 2 years of negotiations, the major sticking point appears to be how much access the UK should have, that is, to the Canadian cheese market.
We've been at the table. We've had 8 rounds. The United Kingdom is a really important trading partner for Canada. They are our 3rd largest single country trading partner at over $46 billion a year. So they are an important bilateral partner. I'm actually quite confident that at the end of the day, when we are back at the negotiating table, we will negotiate a deal that is a good deal for Canada. That's my priority. Canadian businesses and exporters expect me and our government to get a good deal for Canada, and that's what I intend to do.
Well, Dairy Farmers of Canada says expanded access to the Canadian dairy sector should remain off the table in trade talks. Until those talks resume, Ottawa will shift its focus to ratifying the revised Canada-Ukraine trade agreement. That bill has yet to clear Parliament. Former U.S. President Donald Trump testified briefly at his civil defamation trial in New York. Benji Heyer reports.
Donald Trump took to the stand for just a matter of minutes, enough time, though, to say that he maintains his denial of E. Jean Carroll's allegations. This trial's all about deciding how much he should pay for defaming her, something he's already been found liable of doing by a separate jury. She's seeking $10 million in damages, arguing that Trump's past statements about her unleashed a torrent of death threats and online vitriol. His comments in court earlier were brief and focused, and they had to be, given he wasn't allowed to offer any testimony explicitly saying or even implying that he didn't sexually assault Ms. Carroll. Prior to testifying, he was heard insisting that they'd never met, despite photographic evidence of them together years ago. This is a civil case. Mr. Trump also faces 4 criminal trials as he vies to take the Oval Office again. These include 2 in relation to his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election, which he lost, and a trial into his alleged mishandling of classified documents taken from the White House. Yet, remarkably, rather than hampering his bid for the presidency, his legal woes seem to be driving his campaign forward as he continues to brand himself as someone not just being prosecuted, but politically persecuted. Trump is odds-on to be the Republican Party's nominee to take on Joe Biden in November. The juries in the New York trial return on Friday to hear closing arguments. Benji Heyer for CBC News, Washington.
Well, just ahead, we'll go live to Montreal, where Habs legend Patrick Roy is back behind the bench at the Bell Centre. Our Douglas Gellivan is there to share some of the excitement with us. That's next on Canada Tonight. Fans at the Bell Centre in Montreal will have one eye on the ice and another on the visitors' bench. That's because Patrick Roy is back in the house in his new role as the New York Islanders head coach. The former Canadiens goaltender remains a big fan favorite in Quebec. Douglas Gallivan is at the Bell Centre in Montreal for us. So you've got, a front row seat here, and you got to witness some of the excitement earlier. What was that like?
Well, the Montreal Canadiens are a franchise that always seem to do the right thing in the moment, and tonight was another great example of that. Patrick Roy making his return to the Bell Centre as the head coach of the New York Islanders. They played a beautiful photo montage of some of his exploits as a player on the team during the Canadian national anthem, and I have to say it was one of the more boisterous Canadian national anthems that I've heard at the Bell Centre over the years. And then afterwards, the cameras focused in on him, and there was a nice standing ovation from the crowd here. Let's have a look at that. Now, Travis, that was a really nice moment, but Patrick Roy wasn't hired by the New York Islanders to go on an appreciation tour around the NHL. This is a team that is struggling and trying to get back into the playoffs. He was essentially hired to come in and save the season for this team. Now, earlier today, he was kind of trying to deflect away some of the attention that he was going to be getting tonight by saying that it really is about the team. But when you look back at what this man meant to the Montreal Canadiens and their fans, the Stanley Cup in 1986, the Stanley Cup in 1993, and then in more recent times as the head coach of the Quebec Remparts, winning the Memorial Cup in 06, and then just last spring in 2023 as well. It was no surprise that many of the fans were coming here tonight in order just to see Patrick Roy. I asked him about that before the game and how if he had a message to the Montreal Canadiens fans, and this is what he had to say.
You might not like my answer, but today it's not about me. It's about our team. It's a 4-point game, and this is where the focus has to be. And that's what I said to the guys. I said, tonight we're coming in. I mean, whatever's going to happen before the game, I really want to make sure that we're ready when the puck drop, and it's playoff hockey for us.
So even the Montreal Canadiens players understand how big of a moment this is for their fans to have a player like Patrick Roy coming back into the Bell Centre as a coach. Here's what Brendan Gallagher had to say about that before the game.
One of the best to ever do it. He means a lot to this city. Won Stanley Cups, dominated playoff runs. I think a lot of people relate to him. He was emotional. He wore his heart on his sleeve, and a lot of people really respected everything he did, and for good reason.
And I know that you've been talking to fans as well. They are very excited. What are they saying?
One thing that always impresses me about Montreal Canadiens fans is how connected to the history of this team that they are. The last time the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup was more than 30 years ago, and that's when Patrick Roy stood on his head to make it happen. He hasn't played a game in a Montreal Canadiens uniform since being unceremoniously traded away in 1995. So for a lot of the younger fans nowadays, Travis, they don't necessarily have a connection to his playing days here in Montreal, but everyone that you speak to still has a connection to it because they are such students of the history of the Montreal Canadiens. Let's have a listen to a few of them that I spoke with earlier today.
He's someone I idolized since I was like 6 or 7, so I've been a Habs fan ever since, and it was sad when he left, but it's awesome that he's back in the NHL.
It would be better if he coached Montreal, but...
He's the top of the class for goalies, especially from Quebec, so I think when he talks, players listen, and I think it's good for the city.
I'm an Islander fan from New York, though, so it's great. It's great. He's a legendary goaltender. It's amazing that he's our coach now. I'm very happy for it, but I think the crowd's going to be very, very, very loud in there tonight. Should be interesting.
And I think the Montreal Canadiens responding to that energy from the crowd here tonight, Travis, because they scored the first 3 goals of this game, and the Islanders find themselves in a big hole here in the first intermission. We'll see how the rest of the game goes, but if it gets any worse for the Islanders, we might be able to see one of those patented Patrick Roy blow-ups behind the bench. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Doug, good to see you. Thanks for this. That's Doug Galvan in Montreal. Well, the Juno Awards are making their way to Vancouver next year.
Good evening, Vancouver. Hello, Vancouver. Hello, Vancouver.
It will be the 5th time Vancouver will host the ceremony, which is scheduled for March 2025. The last time the city hosted the Junos was 2018, with Michael Bublé hosting and more than 20,000 attendees. This year's ceremony will be out of Halifax in March, hosted by Nelly Furtado. Still to come, Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Melissa Lantsman, is standing by for a wide-ranging conversation about her party's priorities ahead of the House resuming. We'll also talk about interest rates, housing, and much, much more. That conversation that is coming up next here on Canada Tonight. It is 8 o'clock in Sudbury, Ontario, 6 p.m. in Lethbridge, Alberta, and 5 o'clock in Surrey, BC. This is Canada Tonight. Countdown to the House resuming. We'll speak with the Deputy Leader of Canada's Conservative Party, Melissa Lantsman, is standing by live in studio. Backlash to Ottawa's cap on international student permits. Our intersection panel is standing by to discuss. And from the Toronto Fringe Festival to the London stage, Kim's Convenience makes its European debut. But we begin this hour with the Liberals' winter caucus retreat in Ottawa. It kicked off with an address from the Prime Minister. He was keen to point out differences in his party's approach compared with the Conservatives. Take a listen.
Things that matter deeply in the daily lives of Canadians. Pierre Poilievre and his team voted against the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Dental Care Benefit. They voted against $10 a day childcare and voted against programs for seniors. We fought against inequality, raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class, and over the past years have helped lift over 650,000 kids out of poverty.
We also heard from Jagmeet Singh, who made his closing remarks at the NDP caucus retreat, criticizing the Liberals for their track record on housing affordability.
At a time when people are as worried as they are, we hear Justin Trudeau has just given a speech, and he said that he is going to fight for the hopes and dreams of young people. The audacity of the Prime Minister, who's had 9 years to do that very thing, to say that now he's going to fight for the hopes and dreams of young people. He had 9 years to do so. And in 9 years, where are the hopes and dreams of young people? Well, young people have absolutely given up the dream of ever owning their own home. They don't even know if they can find a place to rent. They're not even sure if they can find a job that pays enough for them to put food on the table.
And the Conservatives will be meeting this Sunday to discuss their priorities heading into the next sitting of Parliament. Joining me now to discuss that live here in studio is Melissa Lantsman. She is the Deputy Leader for the Conservative Party of Canada and MP for Thornhill. Thanks for coming in on Canada Tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So first off, let me just get your reaction to what you just heard there from Jagmeet Singh and the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister says, you know, the Conservatives aren't supporting social programs like the Canada Child Care Benefit, dental care, and on and on and on. What's your response to that? And then we'll go to Jagmeet Singh.
Look, the Liberals have had retreat after retreat where they haven't addressed the issues that Canadians are actually talking about. And that's affordability. There are 2 million Canadians waiting in lines at food banks. The price of a house has doubled. The price of a mortgage has doubled. The price of rent continues to increase, and that has also doubled. And these Liberals have done nothing to address these affordability issues. So we're waiting for the moment where they start to answer the concerns of Canadians, the concerns that we're hearing from coast to coast to coast.
And on the social issues, you know, he's critical on, you know, dental care, child care, etc. What's your response to specifically that?
Look, we've talked about this in the House. We don't have currently we don't have a dental care program. Mm-hmm. In terms of child care, it is become impossible to get a spot. This is not a program that works for the government, and it's certainly not one that Canadians are asking for, have asked for, or are happy with. Just like the Liberals' entire plan.
Okay, and Jagmeet Singh there, you know, criticizing the Liberals on housing affordability. What's your response to that?
Jagmeet Singh has voted time and time again with the Liberals to keep them in power, to raise taxes, to raise the price of housing. They have continuously voted with Liberals, come out to the podium and say we've either reluctantly done so or we're not going to. We haven't seen a day yet where the NDP has not saved the Liberals. Mm-hmm. And together that cover-up coalition of every single scandal in the House of Commons continues at the behest of Canadians.
You know, there's lots of retreats going on right now, lots of meetings. I know that your party is going to be meeting this weekend to kind of strategize before you go into the House on Monday. Talk to me about some of the Conservative priorities as you head into next week.
Look, our priorities are the priorities of Canadians. We are going to meet this weekend. We're going to do it in Ottawa and not in a fancy hotel in Montreal. And we're going to talk about the issues that we've been talking about for more than a year now. Housing affordability, inflation, interest rates, rising taxes like the quadrupling of the carbon tax that the Liberals are still committed to doing, even after their own caucus has revolted on it, even after they've carved out pieces of it. We're also going to talk about the violent crime that is raging in our cities, the drugs, the disorder, the chaos.
I want to talk to you, I want to zone in on one of the things that you just mentioned there, and that's interest rates, because we did see the Bank of Canada hold steady here on that key interest rate at 5%. We were talking about this on the intersection panel yesterday and about how this is really squeezing Canadians right now, but the Liberals say there are a lot of global factors at play here, that it's, inflation can't be blamed on one party. There's so many different factors going on. What's your response to that? And talk to me about the interest rate and what you thought of the Bank of Canada holding steady here.
Look, we have Canadians, again, from coast to coast to coast, who are struggling just to get by. They're struggling to keep their homes. They're struggling to put food on the table. That's the excessive taxes and that's the excessive spending of the Liberals. We've been clear on that. We're going to continue to hold this government to account on the wasteful spending that they are frankly, they continue to do and continue not to understand what Canadians want. You can go out into the street here in Toronto, in Vancouver, in Montreal, in any place, and there is no Canadian that is better off today than they were 8 years ago. And that's what we're going to continue hammering the government for.
The Prime Minister did a year-end interview with Rosemary Barton. He said, it's fine and good for the Conservatives to be able to criticize, but I have to come up with solutions here. When the Conservatives say that, and they say, when the Liberals say that, and they say the Conservatives are just not providing solutions, what's your response?
Well, we have provided plenty of solutions on housing. For instance, we are going to fund those municipalities who approve more housing and penalize those that don't. There is a solution right now. There is something that the government can have done. Under this government, for the last 8 years, you have seen a doubling in housing costs. This is the fastest that it's happened anywhere. That happened in Canada under the watch of Justin Trudeau. So it's all fine and good that he doesn't believe that any of this is his fault. But we're going to continue holding them to account. They now have a housing minister who screwed up the immigration file, file, who's now in charge of just building more houses, of now addressing the problem that Canadians have faced over the 8 years. They have created the problems, and now they're trying to cover up and solve the problems that they themselves created.
Let me ask you about this news on the student visa cap, which we heard Ontario colleges today say, they were not consulted about. They don't agree with this decision. What's your thinking here, and what would the Conservative Party have done differently? Because, the minister said that this really is a pause to try to deal with this situation. There are a lot of bad actors in this industry.
Immigration has become out of control under this government. In fact, those aren't my words. Those are the words of the current immigration minister about the last immigration minister, who's now in charge of fixing housing. We are going to tie immigration to the number of homes available, the number of jobs in the labor market, the amount of professionals like doctors and nurses that every Canadian deserves to see. Look, if you're coming here for the Canadian dream, probably a lot like your parents and my parents did, then you have to be able to offer that. And right now, there's an imbalance, and we've got to address that. They have screwed up the immigration file, and we are going to fix it. A common-sense Conservative government will fix immigration.
Yesterday, we heard from an MP calling for a Liberal MP calling for a leadership review. He later walked that back, but today we also learned about the departure of Justice Minister David Lametti to the private sector to be a lawyer. How do you think this is going to play out in the next sitting?
Look, this isn't the first time we've heard about Liberal caucus members having issues with their leadership, with the Prime Minister, with his leadership. Ken McDonald, before PMO told him to retract those comments, was very clear and on the record. We've seen anonymous sources and various news stories calling for the same thing. There certainly is unrest. Canadians are noticing, and now his own caucus is saying exactly what Canadians in the streets are saying, that they don't believe that he should lead this party, or there should be some kind of review. The point is that they don't have confidence in his leadership, and I think maybe we'll see a lot more of that. As for Mr. Lametti, of course, we wish him well in all of his endeavors, but this comes on the heels of a landmark federal court decision on the Emergencies Act, the invocation of the Emergencies Act, the illegal invocation of the Emergencies Act, and we're not surprised to see the Justice Minister who was in charge at the time go.
What are Conservatives going to do to appeal to more moderates, particularly on social issues?
Well, look, I think Canadians see that what is happening right now is not working. It's not working in terms of higher taxes. It's not working in terms of higher housing prices. It's not working in terms of in terms of higher food prices and the out of control inflation on that. This is, these are issues that face every single Canadian, and I think that message is resonating. And if it wasn't resonating, then I don't think you'd hear the Prime Minister even acknowledge that there is a problem. And that's exactly what we're going to keep talking about. Common sense solutions to give Canadians, to allow Canadians to keep more of their money, have more freedom to spend it where they want, and be able to live a life, to work hard and get ahead.
I got to sneak one more in because I got to run here soon. But Conservatives are often, blamed for the demise of political discourse. My colleagues in Ottawa asked the Liberals how much responsibility they hold. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this.
Look, this is another distraction. This is another distraction that I think is Liberals are throwing out there because they don't like the very fact that they're being held to account. Look, this is an issue I think that touches every single parliamentarian and every single Canadian. And I think if the Liberals were more responsible in government, we'd have less conversations that divide Canadians, less conversations that are politically charged, and more about the substance in public policy.
Okay. Melissa Lantsman, Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, MP for Thornhill. Appreciate you stopping by Canada tonight. I know you got a busy weekend ahead, and then a busy week ahead as well. Come back again.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Well, still ahead on Canada Tonight, our panelists meet at the intersection. We'll hear what they think about the impacts of Canada's international students cap, and where does the responsibility lie for the search of the remains at Winnipeg landfill. That debate coming up next here on Canada Tonight. Stick with us.
could lead to program closures, campus closures. It will certainly mean a number of layoffs, and I think there's a real concern for what this means in the mid and long term.
Revisiting one of our top stories and the backlash to Ottawa's cap on international student permits, the organization representing Ontario's 24 public colleges says the cap essentially slashes their budgets. To compensate, Colleges Ontario is asking the province to approve a $135 increase in the per-student annual tuition and raising provincial grants by 10%. All right, now time for Intersection, the part of the show where we unpack some of the hot topics trending in Canada tonight. Meeting at the intersection, Robin Gill, Canadian journalist, Charles Adler, a writer and podcaster, and Sheila North, the former Manitoba Grand Chief, as well as an advocate and author, that is. And Robin's in Vancouver, Charles and Sheila are in Winnipeg. Hi, all.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi,
Okay, we're going to start with that top story there that you just heard, and that's the federal government's cap on international student visas. And what should be done really about this? Because Ontario colleges saying, you know, this is going to really hurt them. I'm going to go to you first, Robin, here on this story. What do you make of it? What do you make of what Ontario colleges are saying right now?
Let's first of all talk about the announcement itself. I think what was lost in it was that the focus was on illegitimate institutions. These are these fly-by-night operations. They change their name when they're discovered, and they're turning out these certificates that don't really mean anything. They're exploiting these students. So that's one aspect of the announcement from Mark Miller. And the other aspect of that is that these same students are also being put in housing units where they're like 8 to 10 people in a bedroom. This is not safe, it's not healthy, it's actually quite dangerous. I think that got neglected in this announcement. But when you talk to the legitimate institutions, I think that there's an opportunity now for the federal government and the provinces to negotiate what those international caps would mean for them. And I think that they're going to actually be able to keep their international streams, because as we all know, we don't actually have the statistics right now because those 3 years of COVID basically messed up the stats. We don't actually know how many are going to be coming and going in the future because, as you know, those numbers aren't really accurate at this point.
Well, Charles, let me ask you this. You know, the president and CEO of Georgian College told me that the government really needed to be more precise here, and instead they just painted, everybody with the same brush. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that Robin makes an excellent point about how, and I don't know why this has been left out of the whole thing today, but the thing is many students are getting ripped off. You know, it's one thing to say that we welcome the students of the world to Canada, but it's another thing to rip them off at fake colleges. And so that's got to stop. The other thing that's got to stop is we've got to stop having a situation where we bring students here but don't have decent housing for them. Once again, we can say that we're friendly to the world, but we've got to have housing that is actually not just affordable, but decent and safe. And the other thing is, it's a political problem that the government is in, and they're in a real bind right now. The impression that most Canadians have is that we have far too many people coming into this country, and it's driving up the price of housing. And it might not be popular to say that sometimes a government has to do things for political reasons, but there is just a crush of polling that indicates that Canadians are demanding that we bring in fewer people, because bringing in as many as we're bringing, especially including the international students, is driving up the price of rent, and is driving up the price of housing for those people who want to purchase homes, including many young people in this country who are really cut out of the market right now because they find it unaffordable. And some of that problem lies with international students, unfortunately, not the students themselves, but the policies in place.
Okay, Sheila, let me ask you this, and to pick up on that point that Charles was just making, and we'll get into my conversation with Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman here in just a moment. But you know, she essentially made the same point that Charles made there, saying that this is squarely on the government, and that this 2-year freeze isn't really going to help. They got themselves into this mess, and now they're blaming these private institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to, again, remind ourselves that this was in relation to and in response to the housing crisis that is now bigger than ever, and a housing crisis that has made a bigger problem with all the international students, but also with the crises around the world globally that have brought new people to this country seeking refuge. But we've had a housing crisis for many, many generations, and we still do with the Indigenous communities. So this is not a new problem, unfortunately, and it's getting worse. And it's being brought to the level of trying to address it in some way to the international students. And meanwhile, the other part of it is that international students that are existing mostly in Ontario and other provinces, not necessarily much in Manitoba, but they bring a level of economy and diversity to wherever they go. So that's going to be a factor coming in as soon as we start seeing this being implemented.
Robin, these colleges and universities, they are going to lose a lot of money. What do you think this is going to mean really for the quality of education that students receive if all of this money is being drained from these institutions?
Well, this money is a huge draw for professors and researchers to establish centers of excellence. So that's actually what's at play here, and that's what all these universities are concerned about. They're all trying to expand their research centers. They're trying to get international professors as well as international faculty. So that is going to hurt them on that front. But I do think that there's an opportunity here for the province and the federal government to negotiate something so that they can maintain their streams of international students when it comes to these big time universities, these important universities that are doing really good research in this country.
Okay, Charles, your reaction to that? Do you think that that is a potential solution here? And if not, what do you think is? Because clearly this is a problem.
I agree that it's a potential solution, but unfortunately it will much more likely mean that universities, colleges are going to be told to use a different business model, and the different business model will mean either cutting back research, cutting back on staff, or increasing tuition, which is certainly not going to be popular. But there will be people coming along, especially if there's a new government down the road, who will simply say, guys, you've got to fix your business model. You can't be depending on international students to run these universities and colleges.
Okay, let's go to our second topic, which is a tough one, and that's the search of a Winnipeg area landfill, where the remains of 2 First Nations women who are believed to be the victims of an alleged killer potentially could be. It has caused widespread debate about how far we have come to getting it done. Let me ask you, Sheila, first off, you and Charles are in Winnipeg. Manitoba's new Premier Wab Kinew said that he would put in the work for the search. Do you think that there's has been any progress on that front? And I know he hasn't been in office for a very long time.
Yeah, well, I guess it remains to be seen. I've heard, of course, like everybody else, the commitments, but we also heard commitments from the federal as well, and different kind of commitments at the municipal level. And I think this is all about political will. If it's up to the families, which of course, we know that they want this done yesterday, it would have been done. But, when it comes to decision makers and the amount of money they have to spend, it has to, it has to be a political will to do that. And I think that there is a large amount of public support to do that, maybe not enough to do that. But unfortunately, sometimes this comes down to money and political will. And it's unfortunate because our families deserve dignity. And our families deserve answers. And this is now becoming, an international issue because people have a right to know where their families are buried, if their families are being, repatriated and with dignity. This is an international matter as well, and international communities are starting to pay attention on what's happening.
Charles, what do you make of the former progressive conservative government's reasoning of hazards to workers and concerns about the feasibility of doing a search?
Well, Sheila's on the money when she says basically it's a rhetoric issue. And the previous government had terrible rhetoric on this. They said that this was all about safety, but the underlying rhetoric was simply it was too much money. Too much money to spend on 2 missing and murdered Aboriginal women. That was just a terrible message, not just to Indigenous people in this country. It was a terrible message to send to anyone in this country who cares deeply about human rights. And yes, human rights does involve finding the remains of those people who are murdered in our society. So it was terrible spin, it was terrible rhetoric. Wab Kinew had much better rhetoric, but I'm not going to sit here and say Wab Kinew has made an excellent decision because as Sheila would say, I'm sure, and I don't mean to put words in her mouth, but the gist of what she's saying is absolutely right. The rhetoric is fine, but there is no sense right now of action that follows the rhetoric. We're going to have to wait and see on that.
And Robin, your thoughts on that? I mean, you know, it has been just words at this point. Do you think that we are going to see action? And how politically fraught is this issue for Wab Kinew?
This is politically fraught for WAB and for the federal government. The reality is it's going to come down to money. Let's take case in point in the early 2000s when RCMP had to search Willie Picton's farm and found those remains. Willie Picton was only charged with 6 counts. There were about 33 other women who were identified, and they actually had to stop digging at some point because the costs were so enormous. And there are so many other women that were missing. In this case, is there a potential that, in this case, there is a potential serial killer? Are there potentially more bodies in that landfill? So that's the other question. That's the reporter in me wanting to know that. And I think that's what a lot of other families are going to be hopeful for in the cases where there are missing women in Manitoba.
Okay, we're going to push.
And not only there in Winnipeg, but across Canada, we're hearing
For
about
sure.
landfill issues and concerns across the country as well. So this is potentially going to open up a new level of the discussion and the level of human rights that need to be honored.
Okay, we're going to push pause on the conversation there, and we're going to come back with topics 3 and 4. We'll meet you back at the intersection here on Canada Tonight, and our panel will discuss Donald Trump and how your kids should be playing. That's after the break. Okay, 8:30 here in Toronto, 7:30 in Winnipeg, 5:30 in Vancouver, and that's where our intersection panel is tonight in those cities. Well, I'm in Toronto. Charles Adler and Sheila North are in Winnipeg. Our Robin Gill is in Vancouver. Okay, so we're going to talk Trump now on to intersection. He testified in his defense in the E. Jean Carroll defamation suit today, and he's been causing quite a stir here in Canada. Let me talk to you, Robin, first about this kind of limited rapid-fire testimony, which lasted just a couple of minutes. And I know that there was a lot of concern about putting Trump up, but he seemed to be very disciplined. What did you make of what the ex-president said today?
Well, first of all, it was 4 minutes long, and he was talking about the fact that he had to defend the presidency, and he got bad-dogged by the judge, which was quite hilarious. She told the jurors, don't pay any attention to that. So I thought that was interesting. I don't think he's winning over this judge by any means. And he didn't testify in the first case. He's testifying now because now he's chest pumping. He's thinking he's won the Republican nomination. He thinks he's on a roll right now. So I think she's still going to win her case regardless because she won her first round.
Politically, does this matter, though, Charles? Because he obviously will likely be, I'm going to preface this, it's looking like he is going to be, unless there's a miracle here, the Republican nominee. But I mean, is this going to politically hurt him?
Well, politically, everything Donald Trump is doing is a prop. That's the only reason he's showing up for these trials. And while he did what he had to do as far as what he had to do when the jury was in the box, when the jury was not in the box, he was making the kinds of statements that are very Trumpian. You know, he walked out of the courtroom saying, "This is not America, this is not America." That's what he wants his base to hear, that the America of 2024 is not the America that you'll get once Donald Trump is president. And as far as everything else in this trial goes, Donald Trump actually wants this jury to come back with a major ask. It'll be somewhere around $10 million. That's just for punitive damages that go to the plaintiff. But the jury will then also that's just compensatory damages that go to the plaintiff. But the jury is going to come up with a great big whack of money for punitive damages. In other words, the damages that are assessed to make sure that Donald Trump never says anything nasty about her and never says anything nasty to another woman who has been sexually assaulted. And that number, we'll find out tomorrow, but that number will likely be somewhere around $100 million. And because the jury has been told in this particular trial that Donald Trump is worth a lot of money, that he's a billionaire, because he's on the record, on the court record, bragging about how much money he has, as far as the jury is concerned, he can pay it up. So we're talking about a huge settlement, 8 figures, likely $100 million of punitive, likely about $10 million of compensatory to the plaintiff. And when Donald Trump gets that kind of money in the headlines, it will once again reinforce to him and his base that the country is out to get him. The country, Joe Biden's Justice Department, is persecuting Donald Trump.
Well, we'll see about your prediction on those numbers, if that is the case. But certainly on your last point, Charles, and I'll put this to you, Sheila, that the Biden Justice Department is out to get him. That is a narrative that we have heard repeatedly, and it seems to be kind of baked into Donald Trump's base. Is there any situation where that is not something that they believe? Because there's the current trial, and this is in addition to 4 other cases.
No, I think the narrative that Donald Trump is using and reinforcing is, emboldening his base, and everything that he says, they're repeating in public and to each other and in the polling lines. So even though this is a small victory, even though we're talking about multi-million-dollar settlement possibly, this is a small victory, at least for women who have been facing these kind of assaults for many generations. And of course, this is the grand scale, and it happened many years ago, but there are many women that have faced the same situation, and at least in this way, women who have been in these situations see it as maybe a small victory, but I don't think it's going to hurt Donald Trump at all. In fact, it probably emboldens his base again, and it just goes on and on.
I was going to ask you about NDP leader Jagmeet Singh saying that a Trump return to the White House would be a disaster, but I'm looking at the clock here, and we got to move on to our last topic, and that is a lighter one. Pediatricians are encouraging parents to allow children to take more risks and play outside away from the watchful eye of their parents. So, should kids be playing like kids, Robin, or or do they need to be in this bubble wrap?
I think that we all grew up just fine, and that's exactly what our parents did.
My mom, and she's in Trinidad right now, so she's not in Calgary at home, so she's probably not watching this. But she kind of like kept me in one of these protective bubbles, and now I kind of have all kinds of allergies. I have this.
Makes sense, Travis. Just kidding.
There you go.
You were precious. It's okay.
I still am.
I think the point of this study is to get kids away from this. And frankly, they're walking down the streets with this, and they're actually in more danger stepping off curbs because they're not paying attention, and they're not paying attention to red lights. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. No, it's true, and I mean that is a major concern that the kids use on social media. I look at my nephews, and they're attached to these phones all the time. Charles, do you think kids need to get outdoors, and parents that are like my mom used to be when I was a kid need to just like kind of pump the brakes a little and let the kids out?
Well, Travis, first of all, please forgive me, but I am 100% positive that your mom in Calgary is watching you tonight, just as my mom is watching me tonight.
No, she's on vacation in Trinidad. That's why she's not watching in Calgary.
Hi, Mom. Hi,
you
Mom.
are.
Anyway, my mom is about to celebrate her 90th birthday, and I'm thrilled that she gets to watch me on her favorite channel tonight. But the business of helicopter parenting, and not to date myself too much here, but when I was a child, when I was my mom's little son, we didn't have helicopters back then, so it was a long time ago. But I think that she would agree, and most people watching this would agree, that the helicopter parenting has gone way too far. But to put this in safety terms, I'm totally fine actually with kids playing outside. I am not fine with kids being attached to their iPhones or other smartphones when they're outside, because that is putting them in danger. It's not just kids. I don't care whether you're driving down the streets of Toronto or Winnipeg or Calgary or anywhere else in this country, Vancouver. You're constantly seeing people walking into traffic reading their phones. It's not about being a kid. It's a safety issue. But of course, if a 7 or 8-year-old is walking into traffic reading their phone, that's anything but safe, and that is something that we've got to be mindful of.
Well, Sheila, there are potential hazards that kids can face, and that's why you have overprotective parents sometimes when they are outdoors and out and about. Let me get you to weigh in, and you'll have the last word as I look at the clock on this.
Well, there's many dangers out in the world, of course, as we all know. And, considering the outcome of this report, I imagine that a kookum like me wrote the report, or at least they're the ones who were the basis of the study. Because, the other day, my little 3-year-old grandbaby was over, and I took a shower, and I could hear him yelling at me to come out and see him. So I went out to see him, and he was teetering off a bar stool, trying to get a bowl on a very high top level of a counter. And he was smiling about it. He was saying, "Hey, I'm taller than you." And so at first I did want to shock him so he wouldn't fall off the stool. But at the same time, I was a little bit proud of him that he was able to do that. And I get why there's helicopter parenting, but I get also why we should let a little bit of that room go where they can see their extent of what they can do, even as young people. But of course, there are many dangers as well. It's not the same world as it was in good old little Charles's day. There are many things that are a danger. So we have to be mindful of that as well.
Robin, I lied. You actually are going to get the last word out in Vancouver tonight, because I'm told we have a couple seconds more here. What do you say to parents that are overprotective, then?
Well, listen, as someone who's on the West Coast where we have a lot of nature and we actually have a lot of outdoor space, kids should be outside. But I think you also have to think about the age and the activity. If they're young and they're near water, you should be a helicopter parent. I think those are dangerous scenarios. But if they're out in the park and they're on the jungle gym or they're walking on the pathways, I don't think that they need to worry about being a helicopter parent.
There you go. All right, hope Mom is actually listening to this, because still I get
Hi,
calls,
Mom.
"Are you wearing your coat? It's cold outside."
My mom's like, "We let you out.
Yeah,
You're on your own."
Mrs. Dhanraj, your son is doing a great job.
There you go. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. Robin Gill and Sheila North, thank you as well. Robin Gill, Charles Adler, and Sheila North on the Intersection panel, and we'll see them again here on Canada Tonight.
Thank you, Travis.
Well, still ahead, popular comedy series Kim's Convenience is making its European debut on stage. And we'll have part 2 of my conversation with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. That's all still ahead here on Canada Tonight. The beloved CBC comedy Kim's Convenience is now playing on stage in London, England. Audiences are packing the theater to watch the story of a Korean-Canadian family under the backdrop of their corner store. Abby Kudasen has more on the buzz.
I'm at the Park Theatre here in London on the set of Kim's Convenience that everyone, of course, knows as that successful Toronto Fringe stage play, which became a hit CBC series and ended up on Netflix finding a global audience. And now it's making its European premiere right here in the English capital. And this authentic set featuring all the classics, including Big Turk, O. Henry, Coffee Crisp, and of course, ketchup chips. Ketchup chips, which we do not have here in England, and certainly another Ontario convenience store staple, bagged milk, all 4 liters of it. Now, some of the fans that are coming to watch the show are Canadian. They're feeling homesick. Here's what they had to say.
It was fantastic. It was so It was very emotional, and I think it was so on point. It's something that I think applies to a lot of different cultures when you're the second generation.
Yeah, I really loved it. Yeah, it was so funny. I had a little cry at some point, so yeah, I really liked it.
Esther Jahn, who played Janet in the original production in Toronto, is directing this show, and she says this story has a special place in her heart.
I think now that I'm older and that I now have a child, it just resonates so differently. It was about the story of immigrant children, but coming to the other side, seeing the whole world, and like I said, being a parent, I really so fully understand why Int said it was a love letter to his parents, because it has also taught me so much more understanding of where my parents came from, and also understanding, you know, they're just human. So I think it's taught me to be a better parent, and it's also taught me to be a better daughter.
This production, which still has a couple of weeks left in its run, is already a massive success. Again, it's nearly sold out. Abby Koalasan, CBC News, London.
A wild turkey, yes, a wild turkey that has been spotted wandering the busy streets of Toronto for months now has been safely rescued. And we spoke to the person who made the catch.
Heard a couple of people say that the turkey catch looked easy, which I'm going to take as a compliment, but no, there was nothing easy about that. And I've been doing rescue of wildlife for over 2 decades now, and hopefully I've come up with a couple of ways of outsmarting these critters to make it look easy.
It's not even around Thanksgiving either. This video posted on YouTube by the Toronto Wildlife Centre shows the moment the turkey was caught. The fearless fowl was seen in videos along an on-ramp on the Highway 401. In side streets and in residential neighborhoods, the team accessed the turkey and found that it was in good health. The turkey, I think that should have been assessed. The turkey has now been released to a safer location. There you go. Well, up next, part 2 of our Spotlight conversation with Jeremy Hansen. I asked the Canadian astronaut his thoughts on space exploration by private companies. That and much more of that conversation coming up next here on Canada Tonight. And welcome back to Canada Tonight and part 2 of our Spotlight conversation tonight with astronaut Jeremy Hansen. I want to talk to you a little bit about being a Canadian down there in Houston right now, training. Do you feel kind of an extra sense of responsibility representing a nation?
I mean, I suppose I do when you put it that way. I guess I do. You know, by and large, the sentiment that I have, though, is pride.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of Canada. You know, we're a small country population-wise, you know, relatively small GDP, but we're a really successful country. And this is, you know, this is not the only indicator of that, but this is one of those indicators. We're the second country in the world to send a human into deep space. Why? It's got nothing to do with me. It's got everything to do with thousands of Canadians over decades who had visionary goals that they set, and they held those visions and they pushed through the obstacles and the barriers, and they brought us to this point where Canada can offer enough value to an international partnership where we've been invited to be the second country in the world to fly a human in deep space. It's a huge head nod to Canada, a huge compliment, and I find myself just really proud that we can stand here. It wasn't a gift. You know, I credit American leadership for this routinely because it is extraordinary leadership. They didn't need Canada to do this, that's clear, but they chose to make space for people to bring their gifts and their genius, and Canada rose to that challenge. And it's a good reminder for us because, you know, we're here because of decisions we've made over decades and, you know, decisions we made years ago, but we have to constantly remind ourselves that we have to continue to be visionary, we have to continue to set big goals. And our people in our country, our extraordinary people, will rise to that challenge and create amazing solutions that we need both in space and on the planet.
Well, you have certainly boosted interest in Canada's space program. As a nation, how do we continue to build on that? How do we continue to build a robust space program in Canada?
Yeah, it's simple and hard all at the same time. The simple aspect of it is that we just keep doing what we've always done. So we look for areas where the problems that we face on the planet overlap with what we have to solve in space. And so that means that we can sort of do 2 for 1, if you will. So there's a couple areas that we're working on that are relatively new, that are really interesting. So food. So if we want to go to Mars or even have a sustainable presence on the moon, we have to grow food there. Well, if we can't grow food in the Canadian Arctic, there's no way we can do it on the moon. So we're looking at solving that problem on the planet, partnering with people that live in these remote communities, with Indigenous, Inuit communities, to teach us to learn together how to grow food in these harsh environments and then take those lessons to the moon. We're doing the same with health. So if we're going to send astronauts to deep space, we're going to need to change how we deliver healthcare in space. Well, with the technology of the 2020s, we can also make big leaps with how we deliver healthcare on the planet. So this is another area that we're looking at. Hey, let's solve it here on the planet and take those lessons to space with our international partnership. Robotics is another area that we're focusing on. Obviously, you look on the back of the $5 bill and space robotics is one of our niche areas, but it is an up-and-coming commercialized opportunity for Canada. And so you want, for all these, you know, these commercial space stations that are going to be built, you want Canadarm on these space stations. When you look at spacecraft going to Mars, you want Canadian robotics on those spacecraft. And so why? Because it contributes to the economy. It keeps us at the leading edge of space robotics. We have it right now, but there are opportunities for us to grow our space economy, our chunk of that pie here in Canada.
There's a lot of innovation happening by private companies as well when it comes to space. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, you know, the evolution of space tourism and also the commercialization of space.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I mean, there's always challenges as things change, and there'll be ups and downs and bumps in the road for sure. But by and large, it's a huge win. The whole idea of government programs typically is to buy down the risk until commercial entities can accept those responsibilities and carry them forward. So, you know, they're often able to be more agile, move more quickly. And so as soon as you can transition things to commercial, you know, in a way that serves your population, that's a win. And so any money that gets spent by space tourists is helping us with respect to buying down the cost of launch of everything that we're doing. As commercial interest increases for lunar exploration, that buys down our costs. We're sort of sharing the costs of going back to the moon.
You have said that the thing that you're looking forward to the most when you get up in space is looking back down on this little planet that we call Earth. Not many people get that perspective. What do you think that's going to be like?
I don't know. I've thought about it quite a bit. It's hard to know what it'd be like. My colleagues that have been to space and seen the Earth from the International Space Station, that's only 400 kilometers above the surface. Remember, I told you, even on our second orbit of the Earth, we're going to go up to 60,000 kilometers. I mean, it's vastly different. But my friends that have seen it from 400 kilometers, the way they describe it is that even though they'd seen videos and pictures, it still completely blew them away. I know I'm going to be blown away. On the other hand, I know it's only just going to reinforce something that I already believe, is that, we are one species on this planet. Humanity has to work together. It's going to reinforce that. I think this is one of the things that I love about the space program, is that it demonstrates, it points back to us. It says, look, you can do great things, humans, if you set big goals and you work together. If you create instead of destroy together, you can do extraordinary things. When I look back at the planet, I know I'm going to be thinking about that. And I'm already passionate about it, but I'm going to come back with a renewed sense of that need for humanity to work together. I think you and I would agree on this, that if you watch the news right now, you're not okay with how humanity is doing. It's not good enough. We can do a lot better. And Artemis 2 isn't going to fix that, unfortunately. But I do hope that during Artemis 2, that people will just pick their heads up for a moment and reflect upon those types of thoughts, that realization that we are ultimately got to this place because of people collaborating. And as soon as we figure out how to all collaborate, we're going to significantly improve our existence on this planet and on other planets in our solar system.
You are doing extraordinary things, Mr. Hansen. We certainly appreciate you chatting with us here tonight.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure, and I'm just so proud of Canada for putting us in this position. And I know it's going to pay dividends for our youth looking at this opportunity and realizing the sorts of things that they can achieve in their future because of it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care. All right, before we go, we have some breaking news just into us. CBC News has learned that at least one of 14 charges against Kenneth Law will be upgraded to first-degree murder. Law is facing both second-degree murder and counseling or aiding suicide in connection with 14 deaths across Ontario. Now, at this point, it's not clear how many of those charges will be upgraded. Thomas Dagg is standing by with the new details, that is, on the National, which is coming up right after us here in just a moment. And again, CBC News learning one of the 14 charges against accused poison seller Kenneth Law will be upgraded to first-degree murder. I'm Travis Dhanraj. Thanks so much for watching us from Canada Tonight. The National is next.